Botani Mzansi, and welcome to the Sheds. My name is Yaniso Tjeku. I am with Nkosana Lekotolo. We are shedding light on issues affecting citizens. Chalas, man. I'm all right, man. Chalas, you have a relationship with Maspal as a resident, yes. Right? And
it's my first of entry.
Yes, Mchalas.
Yeah, you know
for your bin to be removed.
Opening the tap.
Yes. Yeah. Amanzi, yes. Electricity.
We live in municipalities.
To go to a park, Mchalas.
Yeah, we don't live in national or provincial government.
Exactly, Mchalas. When you want to lay somebody to rest, you need a municipality. Yes. How is your relationship with the municipality?
I'm hoping, I'm very active in my municipality. Yes. My councillor, I hope, is watching. I keep him all on his toes.
Oh, okay. So you're an active citizen.
If my bin is not collected, I quickly go on the WhatsApp and say, Councillor, what's happening?
So you demand those services?
Yes.
So you're that citizen, when you see a pothole?
Active.
You call it?
I lock potholes.
Yeah. When you see a best water in the street, do you say, this does not affect me?
No, I follow through. And I hope a lot of people, our viewers, follow through as well.
Definitely, because today we're shedding light on local government, on coalitions, on municipalities, on everything that has got to do with the services that we are getting. And to help us do that, we have Dr. Thina Nzo, my sister, man.
Monoput.
Kunzani?
Diphilile wena njani?
Nami ndiyaphila.
Yes.
Let's get people to know you. Dr. Thina Nzo holds a PhD in African Studies from University of Edinburgh. She has a master's in local government studies from University of Birmingham. So we have a power, She is currently a senior researcher for the local government program at the Public Affairs Research Institute. She has acquired 16 years of professional work experience, which spans as a researcher, a project coordinator, a trainer, and a consultant in local government policy and governance-related work. Before joining Param, she worked for the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, where she was providing public policy training for political party representatives in Ethiopia. She has conducted research on parliamentary and political party relations in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Benin. Her key research interest in local government studies focus on examining how South African bureaucracies work in practices, the precarity of representative of local democracy and coalition politics. Coalitions, she knows about that. She'll tell us a thing or two about coalitions and the state-society relations, intergovernmental relations. It goes on and on and on. My sister, you've been around.
What an experience.
I've been around.
Yes.
I've been around for quite some time.
There is a district municipality in the Eastern Cape called Alfred Nzo. Do you want to tell us something about that?
Well,
Dr. Thina Nzo.
I've done some research.
Nzo municipality.
I've done some research at Alfred Nzo municipality. In fact, I'll be publishing the research that I did last year in partnership with one of the organizations that are working there. But yeah, it was just a coincidence. And ukufika kwaMphayana, they were saying, wow, sakwamkela, ntombi yasekhaya, ubuyile ekhaya.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yes, kusekhaya. So that's where we are from originally, as the Nzo family. We are from Ematatiela, Nase Mount Fletcher. Those two places is where you'll find Ingabi, Yakwanzo. Yes.
So a grandchild of a stalwart.
Absolutely.
After whom that municipality is named?
It's named after. Yeah. So yeah, those are where my origins coming from.
Yes, coalition government. And I think that's what keeps us awake. I think a lot of metros and clusters, you have realized that we are not prepared, I think. And I think that's one of the questions that we will ask you, Dr. Nzo, that are we prepared as South Africa for coalition government, particularly in local government? Are we well equipped?
Can we ever be prepared for anything as a country? It's a good question. Honestly speaking, I think Prince, we have to go back a little bit in history in order for us to understand where we are currently. Post-1994, there were many presumptions that were made that the ANC as a liberation movement that had popular support would get into power and enjoy that support and sustain that support. And obviously, during the period where, there was a restructuring of local government, if you look at the different pieces of legislation that were established post-1994, particularly in your late 1990s, like Municipal Structures Act, the Systems Act, followed by Municipal Finance Management Act. I would say that Your answer will lie in the Municipal Structures Act, because if you look at the Municipal Structures Act, it was designed in a way that it presumed that we will always have a majoritarian democracy in local government. And there weren't those intricacies where if power should have shifted, how would local government institutions will be able to deal with the power dynamics, such as coalition governments or minority governments or non-formation of governments, if I should put it like that. And we term them as hung councils. So there wasn't much thought that was put into that, forecasting of a scenario. And I think that is why, 27 years later, we find ourselves where, the majority party has lost political power. It has struggled now to get into terms where they can actually sit on the backbench. And some of the parties who are having to now come into the forefront and become coalition partners are also struggling. And the reason why we're even finding loopholes is that the legislation did not accommodate that. So that's where the crux of the matter is. And I vehemently say that in order for us to start even dealing with coalition governments, maybe structurally through our legislation, we need to go and review at first. But before I get into other politics that are inclined with that, I do think that's the point, of departure.
I want to make a follow-up before you come in on that, Dr. Nzo. As a scholar of local government, and I want to stress this even further to say, in the context of democracy, especially in local government, do you see this is it something good for us as the democracy coming out of age? I mean, for a long time we were called, I think, adolescents, democrats, but now we've come out of age. Is it good for us in terms of democracy?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We are a young democracy, but we have matured before our time. Because the predicaments that we are faced with is a predicament that is not new, in the sense that there are older democracies that have had coalition governments, particularly from the European global north. I've stayed there for quite a long time during my studies, and I also saw the kind of challenges that they also have to face. It's not an easy system to govern. Although the presumptions that are made are that, if you step away from a dominant party system, and you enter into a system where there is power sharing.
Which is us, what we have been
Absolutely. Then there is balance of power. And that balance of power automatically comes with the understanding that, our political representatives will be mature enough to know that what they have to put in the forefront is the interest of their constituencies or communities. And if they need to get into such arrangements, then they have to find partners, other political parties that they can form partnerships with, within a momentum of saying that what is the common interest, what binds us together, and that's where policy matters.
You were talking about what brings us together, and you've earlier mentioned Municipal Systems Act, Municipal Structures Act. There's SALGA as well, and you've got political parties. And what I take from is that all these role players did not seem to have been ready for where we are in terms of coalitions. And you say it depends on what brings us together. Other than what brings us together, and we've seen the chaos, what do you think we need to do? Because clearly each political party, each independent candidate is there for themselves. What is it that needs to be done so that there's stability in municipalities?
Okay, all right. Although I don't like to term myself as a pro-reformist, but at some stage, when a system is structurally not working, for its citizens, when a system is not working structurally for its institutions, then you've got to take a step back and review legislation. I mean, it's one of the things that we talk about at work, where we are saying that let's go back to the white paper, because there are certain promises that have been made in the white paper, stemming from certain presumptions that would be made in relation to local government being able to be financially viable, financially sustainable, collecting its own rates and taxes, and therefore there is a certain percentage, obviously, that they would be getting from the division of revenue. But we've found that, unfortunately, municipalities are struggling,
Yes.
to generate their own revenue. So number one, review the white paper in terms of the local governance performance of municipalities. Secondly, review the legislation, Municipal Structures Act, the Municipal Systems Act as well. Fortunately, the Municipal Systems Act is already being reviewed, and there was also another Municipal Structures Amendment Act, which sought to strengthen the role that is played by, for example, the Municipal Public Accounts Committee. But when it comes to now council itself, when it comes to the way in which mayors are elected, there's a big problem there. There is no longer a majoritarian, and there's a lot of horse trading that is done behind the scenes. And we even need to question whether the executive mayoral system is going to work for us, or should we actually go back, into a system where we have an executive where political parties can actually have a mayor whom they can elect, part of that. So,
if it's political parties who must elect a mayor, what is difficult in having a mayor that can be directly elected by the people themselves?
I was about to even go there as well, to say that, okay, if this system is not working, can we not explore directly elected mayors? Because on the table right now, with the conversations that we are having with the Department of Cooperative Governance, is that they are looking for different systems, borrowing from different case studies that are prevalent in other countries. And in that kind of system, they are trying to, to do away with this whole horse trading and having candidates, because remember, electoral democracy prevents us from participating directly in council because we are dependent on our councillors to represent exactly our views. But then when they go into council and elect an individual, or they decide that they are going to, negotiate with other partners, our voices are not heard. So they are exploring these different systems, and that comes back to what I'm saying, that they are beginning to think about reviewing the pieces of legislation when it comes to the council structures. And not just only the mayors, but let's also look at the way in which council functions. City of Joburg was hamstrung when it came to the vacancy of a speaker. And there was no clarity in terms of, if a speaker has been removed, who becomes acting speaker and what time frame can be used. You understand?
There was a little bit of confusion.
There was a bit of confusion because Section 36 and Section 38 does not provide us with those provisions that if the speaker's seat is vacant, then what happens in the interim? It goes back to legislation. So that's why I'm saying that we definitely need to go on a policy review. The white paper, we need to review the white paper. Let's step back and produce a green paper, and consultations, should be advocated during that period.
Because the ANC is in the majority. And if you talk about reviewing legislation and all policies governing these things, could they not have foreseen this situation that now the country finds itself in, and conducted this review, lead the review, champion it, so that it comes out? I mean, whichever legislation comes about will be voted for in parliaments and legislators, so they can do this. Why do you think this has not happened? Could it be that they thought they would be in power forever? Or because now you've got political parties coming up with their own arrangements, with their own rules, and they don't agree on that?
Yeah. It's always the presumption of post-liberation movements that come into power, that they will continue to enjoy that legitimacy because they use the liberation discourse, to sustain the support. And knowing that they are a political party that was representing the majority, the assumption was that the majority of this country, which are poor, who don't have access to economic opportunities, who have been previously disadvantaged in participating in political spaces, they will see the ANC as a political organization that will sustain, their kind of ambitions, future ambitions. So they also made that assumption. And obviously, as we can see, the ANC is still trying to grapple with power. It is still trying, to cling on to power. And most probably that's why we're also even finding it very difficult for not just only the ANC, but also other political parties coming into the fore when it came to the review of the electoral bill for the provincial and the national government elections in order to allow other independent candidates, to contest for elections. So there will always be this pushback.
I want to take us a little bit step back, Dr. Thina Nzo, to talk about, I think you painted a picture of, I think, the system which is broken. And you've spoken about municipalities. I think it's contained in the constitution as well, that their core mandate is to provide services,
yes,
make sure that there's clean water, electricity, and to collect revenue. But a lot of municipalities in the country seems to be failing to do that. What do you think is the problem?
That's why I refer back to the white paper. You see, we are faced with very difficult times where our economy is not performing very well. We are failing to grow our economy. Our GDP is at its lowest. At the same time, that poor economic performance is embedded in a country that has so much inequalities. And those inequalities, you find them predominantly, in your previously marginalized, groups in South Africa, your Black communities. And those communities, if they aren't able, to find economic sustainability or find economic opportunities that will contribute towards them paying for their rates and their taxes, how do you think that is going to affect a municipality? I mean, never mind the division of revenue bill, which allows national government, to make allocations to all the different municipalities. It's insufficient as well. So that is one of the biggest hurdles that I think that we are faced with today, considering why municipalities are not able to.
What is that? People are not able, they no longer have cash to pay for their services that come from municipalities.
That's one indicator which is very important for us to think about. Poverty is real. Poverty exists in our major metropolitan municipalities. We were just speaking about it before we came into the session, about the pockets of poverty that we find in urban areas. And, we find that most of these pockets of poverty, it's communities who are in your townships, who are in informal settlements. It's communities who are also within the city, the inner city, who are looking for opportunities in the city but are unable, to get access to housing and accommodation, affordable accommodation. It's communities who are actually living in dilapidated buildings. But there's also another complexity towards that. Yes, municipal institutional's ability to collect. We find that municipalities also institutionally in their arrangements, in their debt collection system, they are not performing as proficiently. Some of us are within the stratification of living in suburbs where we can be able to afford to pay our services, but our bills, they don't come on time. Our bills, they've got wrong meter readings, wrong electricity readings, and therefore there's a whole process of contestation that also goes into that. And instead of municipalities finding a system of getting correct readings, sending out their bills on time, making sure that they follow up on their debt collection, yes, there could also be that institutional lacking. But on the other hand, you have to also accept that most probably there might be a population that might decide that, well, you know what, I don't feel like paying my bill this month. And then they end up not paying their bills, yes.
In your research, do you find that municipalities attract the best talents? For instance, the best of the most experienced people, most qualified academics, accountants, legal advisors, all these professionals. Do you think municipalities as they are now are attracting those, or the qualified and professional people with expertise don't necessarily go to municipalities? Could that be part of a problem?
I mean, if we didn't have that problem, we wouldn't be talking about the professionalization of local government bill today. Wow. I mean, there's research that had been done since the time of the late Minister of Cooperative Governance, the late Minister Shikeka.
Yes.
He produced a research, dossier that showed the way in which municipalities' internal capacity had been eroded, based from the fact that municipalities did not have the competent and qualified people who were supposed You will be surprised. Have you seen the Auditor General's reports?
Yes.
Have you seen them?
Yes.
Particularly in the Budget and Treasury Office, where you have CFOs who don't even have a qualification as a chartered accountant, yet along in finance. Have you seen those reports? And they're depending on, external contractors to do their books during the audit season. It's a dire situation. I call it the decapitation of the state. And it emanates from the politics that we have seen, where political parties have, tried to push their own political agendas by ensuring that they place people who are questionable, people who are not competent, people who are subservient to political mandates, if I should put it like that. And that is done with the purpose of siphoning resources from the state.
Are you saying professionals do not submit to political mandates? And would it be in the interest of a political party that is in government to hire people who will simply be, submissive to whatever that is said? Why would a mayor, why would an executive, an MMC, why would a city manager, why would a COO, a CFO, why would they be interested in hiring people? Because if you get qualified people, you will get the output to be able to deliver services. Why is that the situation?
So you've got to remember that we are coming from a partisan, bureaucracy where political parties, particularly the ANC to be more precise, as the as the dominant party, was in control of a lot of municipalities,
yes.
and they were using deployment, to appoint, key individuals into key senior management positions. And what happened was that system had been easily manipulated by politicians who actually wanted to appoint people whom they know that they would be compliant to political mandates. Sometimes these political mandates are driven by individualistic interests. And that's why you ended up having people getting into the bureaucracy who are not qualified enough to execute their work with the intentions of knowing that their political masters are the ones that whom they are serving rather than the communities.
Nzo, just in about a minute, next year you're going for national elections. I know your specialty is local government. We're solution driven. What are your parting shots in just a minute? Voter apathy, we've seen it over time in the country. What the voters should do?
The voters must go out and exercise their democratic right. And it's up to the political parties to prove themselves through local government, because local government shapes political opinion in the public. So they need to prove themselves that they are indeed capable of running these municipalities. Because if the current chaos continues, the citizens are going to say, no, you don't deserve our vote. In fact, we will choose to vote for either this party or that party, or not even go to the polls at all. And voter apathy is one of the biggest problems that we have.
Like in 2021, 14 million people didn't vote. 14 million people didn't vote.
And it shows you that our communities, our citizens have lost faith in our party political democracy. They've totally lost faith, and we're faced with a democratic deficit. And if this continues, then it means that we will even question the legitimacy of those who are getting into these parliamentary seats and provincial legislative seats if, let's say, less than 40% of our voter population doesn't go and vote.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thina Nzo, local government specialist. High five.
Thank you
very much. Doctor says go out and vote in order to have leaders that are going to be in charge of the municipalities, which will produce services for you, so that the chaos that we see, the cholera outbreak and everything else that is happening, stops. This has been another installment of The Sheds on Soweto TV. We also have a podcast. Continue watching. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @The Sheds. Thank you very much.